Back at it here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you're catching us via the podcast later on in the week, we stream live on Tuesdays now during the offseason. Coming at you a little bit early tonight, 8 p on the Central Time, and much to cover here on the Red, Gold, and Bold, like the signing of Jawaan Taylor. The Chiefs apparently or not moving on from Orlando Brown. We'll discuss whether or not that door remains open or should remain open with Orlando Brown. Did they get it right with Juwan Taylor? What do they do now at right tackle? Andrew Wiley's moved on to the Commanders. What's the right choice at right tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs? Is Laremy Tunsil still in play? The Chiefs are one of the teams at the workout for the Odell Beckham Jr. festivities in Arizona. Should they be aggressive in going after Odell Beckham Jr.? Spending on O-line, spending on wideouts, what's the right path for this team? And are there any other options that make a lot of sense for these Kansas City Chiefs in free agency? We talk about it right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And welcome to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, free agency style, as the Kansas City Chiefs have dipped their toe in the water or jumped in with both legs. We'll let you be the judge, Jeff. Let's start with the big signing. Jawaan Taylor is a Kansas City Chief. Is this the right direction for this team to be going?
I think so. I mean, I feel like, one, they were not going to spend all summer trying to figure out their offensive tackle situation. They did that the last couple of years. In fact, I mean, obviously the situation with Orlando Brown took up to August to get figured out. And 2 years ago when they brought him in, they were going into April trying to figure it out. And they eventually made the deal to get him from Baltimore. So this was, it felt more like a move of, we're not going to waste time. We know what our options are. This player sounds like a good deal for us. My guess is the money he was offered was what they were offering Orlando Brown Jr. He's a lot like Orlando Brown Jr., obviously, in the sense that he's been a right tackle for most of his career. I know Orlando Brown did that played left tackle in Baltimore for an emergency stint for a while. But Jawaan Taylor has upside. He's athletic. He's young. And let's face it, they found a way to win a championship with Orlando Brown playing the position. This guy is more athletic than he is. Andy Heck's a really good offensive line coach. They found ways to mix and match offensive linemen before. You still have your core interior players there with Creed Humphrey and Joe Thuney and Trey Smith. We'll see what happens at right tackle. I know we'll talk about Laremy Tunsil and those rumors, but if you're going to try to execute something like this in the way the Chiefs are, it helps that you've already gone down this road and found some modicum of success with it.
Eric, is this the Chiefs playing hardball? Orlando Brown, here's your offer. You don't want it, we'll give it to somebody else. Is that what we saw here?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of, like, you know, when a team fires a coach, they'll often like get the exact opposite guy. So if like they had like a Dungy type, then they hire a hard ass, and like vice versa. You know, Orlando Brown was like the least athletic player in my database at PFF. You know, kind of a technician, if that means anything. Juwan Taylor is like much more athletic, he's a younger guy, he's 25 years old. but did not have the production that Orlando Brown had. As far as last year for the Jags, he led the NFL among tackles in percentage of negatively blocked runs, right? So he made more mistakes in the run game as a right tackle than anybody else in the NFL. So this to me is the Chiefs going completely away, saying, look, we won with Orlando Brown, on a deal that, we won with Orlando Brown and kind of like a high floor but low ceiling. Now we're going for a high ceiling here with Juwan Taylor.
When you say most mistakes for a run block, is that like, okay, these are correctable, these are mental errors, or no? Is that just the terminology you used to describe he got beat?
I mean, he got beat more in the run game than anybody else, right? And so the interesting thing is, obviously, when you look at the Chiefs last year as run blockers, were one of the best teams in the league in avoiding those. The percentage of plays where no offensive lineman got beat. So, is that the quarterback? Is that the fact that linebackers are scared? Is that the fact that defensive ends can't rush upfield as much because, the quarterback is so elusive? All of those things. I think Mahomes makes his offensive line better. I think the Chiefs are looking at Orlando Brown and saying, look, buddy, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson made you. We'll show you the door and we'll make another guy who doesn't have as good a pedigree as you do.
And Jeff, what do you think? Like, how much ceiling? He is only 25 years old with Jawaan Taylor. How much ceiling can be there? How much can a player like this actually get better?
Well, you're talking about a major switch in positions. I think aside from, it's hard to imagine another position on the field that's tougher to do than going from right tackle to left tackle, except maybe going from guard to tackle. But if you're playing right tackle, you're moving to left tackle, you're stepping differently. There's a lot more that goes into it. There's more pressure on you. You're facing better pass rushers. So, yeah, I think that the Chiefs are betting, to Eric's point, the Chiefs are betting on their coaching. And I think they've bet on their coaching before. They bet on it with Tyreek Hill. They bet on it with other players, bet on it with Orlando Brown Jr. And so I'm sure their feeling is we got 2 rings over the last 4 years. We've moved players around and mixed and matched players before. We just went up against a defensive line in Philadelphia in the Super Bowl that had 70 sacks. Nothing was given up in that regard. They're probably feeling pretty good about themselves and their ability to coach players up. So if you're taking a player who has more athletic ability and has more upside, I'm sure they're feeling like we can do more with them. Now, it may blow up in their face. I don't know. But we were sitting here at this point last year talking about Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley as being the starting left and right tackles for this team and being very dubious about how that would work out, and it worked out fine for them.
Yeah, it did because, to your point about the better coaching, right? They understand how to scheme around the weaknesses of the player, and I think that's what, if you look at the grades for Juwan Taylor, he's basically comparable to Orlando Brown as a pass blocker, but in a different way. He's athletic. I've watched every snap of Orlando Brown since he's been a Kansas City Chief, and I'm assuming Taylor's going to be more athletic. That maybe there's going to be some film study, something that will make him more prepared for maybe the pass rush moves he's going to get. Your point about him being on the left side and getting better pass rushers is a good one, but he can't be as stiff as Orlando Brown, right?
Exactly.
He just can't be. And that's no knock. Orlando Brown acknowledges his lack of athleticism. He's a massive guy. He tries to use his size. But I think does this, Eric, have a chance to work better because he's got a better chance to mirror the rush? And as much as you might want, to be able to say, I'm going to protect the inside, shove the guy up the field, and Pat's going to step up, and we're going to be okay on the pass rush. Patrick Mahomes doesn't operate that way. He freelances more. And does Taylor, even though he had the, slightly worse pass protection grade, according to the PFF grades, does Taylor actually stand a chance to be better because he's got a better chance to actually stay in front of the defender and let Pat Mahomes do what he normally does, what he naturally does, and that's a little bit of freelancing around the pocket?
Well, I also think that they're looking at the right tackle position in we'll talk about Tunsil in a second, but they're looking at the right tackle position and saying it's going to be weaker than even Andrew Wiley, who was kind of an $8 million player as it were. So you need, much like when they won the Super Bowl in 2019, you had Mitchell Schwartz, who was the rock. Now, Mitchell Schwartz wasn't super athletic. He talked about on the Sloan panel last year. He was very good at his steps, but like the guy pitched a shutout in the playoffs in 2019. He was the guy that you set it and forget it. Like, I think that that's like kind of where they're trying to go with Jawaan Taylor. And then the right tackle is the position that you help out. Last year, they had to help out both tackles. And, you know, they had an interior offensive line that was good and mostly stayed healthy for most of the year. So it worked out okay. But I think that they envision having one tackle that they hope that the ceiling is a set it and forget it type player. And the right tackle can be the one that Pat works around. Pat had to work around both tackles for the last 2 years. And that I think that they don't want that to happen again.
I think they don't want it to happen, but let's be honest. Let's call it. I mean, Jeff, you were very, Kansas City blew up when Orlando Brown was acquired, and everybody wanted to feel like Jonathan Ogden had just been brought in out of the Kansas City Chiefs. And you said, let's hold on. This guy's played in a run system. He's not that athletic. And I think you proved to be quite prophetic in how you described the play the Chiefs got. It was good enough to win a championship. To Eric's point, he's right. They were able to help creative play calling, keeping defensive linemen off balance, helping when they could. He was good enough. Is Juwan Taylor any better? The grades say a little bit worse on pass blocking. I gave reasons why I think you could be optimistic the pass blocking grade will be better. And Eric pointed out the run blocking grade's god-awful. Is there a reason that you would look at this and be more optimistic than you were when Orlando Brown came to town? Or is this, hey, this is the reality. You're paying the winner's tax. When you pick at the bottom, you can't draft an offensive tackle, a pure left tackle, the set it and forget it type of guy. But so you have to keep doing this. And Orlando Brown wouldn't play ball at the price tag they want, so they got the best they could. There's no reason to think it's going to be any better.
Well, I don't know if you have to keep doing this. I mean, there's always the option of drafting a player and developing a player. I said it before. There's a number of left tackles in this league who have played at a high level who weren't first-round picks. I mean, David Bakhtiari immediately comes to mind. Certainly Donovan Smith, who is leaving Tampa now, was a second-round pick and had some good years for them. So you can find somebody to do the job if you're willing to be patient with them. I'm more optimistic about this move just because I knew Orlando Brown's history coming out of college. And I was at the Oklahoma Pro Day when he was working out, and I knew what coaches down there were saying about him. Like, there's no way this guy's going to be a left tackle. Eric mentioned the combine numbers and the athleticism and all that stuff was saying this guy is not somebody you want to trust as a left tackle. And I think somebody just mentioned in the comment sections about that Adam Schefter's reporting that teams are looking at him as a right tackle now, which is what he is. I mean, he's gotten away with being a left tackle because he had to do it, yes. But he's a right tackle. Now, maybe Jawaan Taylor is of a different ilk and can make it work, but I'm probably more bullish on him just because of his body type, more athleticism, and the fact that I'm not as tainted by what I heard about him coming out of college as I was about Orlando Brown.
There's also something really interesting about the offensive line, right? Like my former colleague at PFF, Timo Risky, wrote an article basically saying, like, look, really good athletes in the trenches age better than any other position. So, what I like about Juwan Taylor is, like, I mean, he sucked for the first 2 or 3 years. You saw some glimmers of hope last year, especially as a pass protector. And in the run game, Mahomes is such a threat with the RPO game and actually, like, to be able to pull the ball out. I know he kind of runs like a duck, but like he's not unathletic. And we've seen it, like the run game is easier to perform for the Chiefs, right? Because they just have a threat at the quarterback position that is unlike any in the game. So if you look at those two things if you have 4 years of tape on a guy, you'd rather buy into year 4, even if the first 3 years are bad, because offensive line, as Jeff's point, that's the biggest athletic mismatch on the football field is left tackle versus right defensive end or right outside linebacker. Like, once they figure that out, once they figure out the steps and the technique and all that kind of stuff, they're there. And I think that that's what the Chiefs are buying into here. Whether or not you view last year as a success or not is a good question. I talk about the warts statistically for Taylor, but that is what they're buying into. They're buying into the fact that for offensive linemen, it's a long game. You're playing a long game for development.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, the Red Gold and Bold podcast is brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They are Kansas City's best, proudly serving the entire metro area. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. You love that. Go ahead and say it, Eric.
They tweeted it. Did you see that? We got engagement on Twitter.
Yeah, I did.
Love Gann.
You give
Touchdown
love.
Kansas City.
Go ahead. They, of course, are nationally recognized here in Kansas City, full service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Thank you to all the folks that have reached out. They've had great response. And so thank you to everybody. If your business has any kind of problem with a parking lot, let them help you out. 816-484-3338. I'll find them online at GannAsphalt.com. What about the Orlando Brown side of this, Jeff? Did he blow this? Are we going to find out that we're going to see him signing a 3-year, a $45 million deal? And I don't think it's going to be that low, but that at the end of the day, he left a lot of money on the table by not signing with the Kansas City Chiefs, that the agent who doesn't really do football agent thing wasn't smart. I heard the report they were talking about with Schefter, who went on to say that he said, look, if you're going to get big money, those deals usually come in the first 2 days. And after that, he did this. All right. Orlando Brown, I'm hearing, is already ready to go on television tomorrow. Like, that is the move. Andrew Wiley was doing that like a week ago on your network, coming on the shows on NFL Network, the agents, getting them out there, getting their name out there, knowing that NFL Network's on in every offices of every NFL team. Let's remind everybody, here's my guy. This is damage control from where I sit. I think that this may be a colossal mistake by Orlando Brown. Do you?
Yeah, like he and Lamar Jackson are consulting each other, trying to figure out who misplayed their hand more right now, right? Which Raven player with Raven ties did worse here? I think he overplayed his hand, and it's some of that has to do with not having an agent. Some of it has to do with just personality, probably. I like Orlando. I did a story on him coming out of college. I talked to him a lot with the Chiefs. I think he's really a smart guy. I just feel like he's like Lamar. I think he's just got this sense in his mind about what he's worth and what he should get, and it's built more on the position than it is on the reality of the marketplace. And so when you look at what's going on with his situation, I mean, it's. I think a good agent would tell you, look, dude, it's like, you were on a championship team, you played left tackle, you got into a Pro Bowl, but here's why it all happened for you. It's like the kid who wound up on third base, thought he hit a triple. It's that mindset. And so, somebody mentioned he's probably going to come back here. I don't think he's coming back here hat in hand. I think he's going to take the best possible deal he can get. He's going to have to accept that it's not going to be top of the market, highest paid offensive lineman in the league money, and he'll move forward. I think that's just where he has to go now.
Yeah, I mean, there's value in there's value in an agent who knows how to act, right? And an agent who, I've had, back in my time at PFF and, a little bit now at Sumer, like I've had interactions with agents quite a bit. And the ones who are the worst are the ones that have one or two clients, right? Like, because they, and I'm not going to name the player, but ultimately, like, if this is your only player, you're going to try to maximize that one guy so that you get your bounty. And in many cases, you've already invested in this guy a little under the table when he was in college, and you're trying to recoup that and all that. Like, if you have an agent who's a real NFL agent, like, they know that they have to act in good faith. You get some here, you lay some there, all this kind of stuff, and you end up getting to a solution. The other part that's really important is having an agent who has experience. The team is more willing to be honest with them in a way that's not going to get back to the player, and you're going to get sideways, to use Petro's term, with the team, right? Like, the thing, and this is more about Lamar Jackson than anything, but like, if you're the Ravens and Lamar goes and says, I want a $300 million guaranteed deal, somebody's got to be like, you're not worth that. But like, it's easier to say that to the agent and not get back to the players, and the player gets hurt feelings and stuff. And if you're an agent that's never had an NFL player before, you might be like, hey, will you get a load of Brett Veach? He just told you that you suck, like you're fat and you're out of shape and you're the worst Eric Eager said you're the worst combine scorer in the history of the combine. Like, whereas a veteran agent's just gonna they're gonna be like, oh, that's just part of the game. Like all of this is to say, like that's where the value of agents come in. It comes from this idea of being able to use the efficient market and get a deal done that works for both parties.
How about the Laremy Tunsil part of the equation? Bob asks, any hope for Laremy Tunsil, or should we give up on that dream? I think all indications, Jeff, are that ship has probably sailed. I wouldn't completely rule it out. I do think, the map was pretty good. I'm with him. I'd love to see it, right? I'd love to see Taylor stay over on the right where he's been, Laremy Tunsil there. They can fit it cap-wise because any deal for Laremy Tunsil would come with renegotiating his contract, bringing the number down. They backload things. They've got $20+ million. Chris Jones' tweet last week certainly made it seem like he's not going anywhere. And if he's not going anywhere, and the way he phrased it would seem like maybe a contract extension's in the works, which could bring his number down, give him even more cap room if they wanted to do it. But I'm with Matt. I've said this all day. I'd love to see it happen. I don't see why the Texans would give up a left tackle, the best pass blocking left tackle in football, when they're wanting to draft a quarterback, unless Laremy Tunsil says, I'm not coming in no matter what. I want out of this hellhole, and I'm not going to play if you don't. And they learn their lesson from their go around with Deshaun Watson. But nobody's reporting that Tunsil's put an ultimatum to him. So is there any reason to believe that Tunsil could be on the market, even though there are reports that the Chiefs have been kicking the tires?
I'm pessimistic about the whole thing. And again, I think when we talked about this, the topic, earlier in the afternoon, my question was, when were these discussions being had? So if they're being had before Jawaan Taylor is signed, I could see them calling the Texans, or the Texans. I don't see the Texans calling them. I think it's more like the Chiefs are like, hey, what do you want to do here? The guy's last year of his deal. It's huge cap number, big salary. You want to make a move on him. But I agree with you. I think the Texans will be crazy to get rid of a star left tackle when you're going to draft a quarterback, for one. And two, just they're not going to give him away if they're going to do it. And so it's like whatever it was. I forget the compensation for Orlando Brown, but I know it was a first and a third or something like that, and a 2 and a 4 coming back. Some kind of, I forget the combination. I guarantee you Laremy Tunsil's not leaving Houston unless someone's talking around 2 first-round picks. There's no way that's even up for discussion. And so on the Chiefs end of it, I also feel like, do you want to be in that game of paying too many people too much money? Because the Jarius Sneed is coming to the end of his contract, Creed Humphrey, Nick Bolton. You've got players who are part of your foundation, part of your culture, who've helped you win a championship. Now that you've got to think about taking care of those guys as well. And I haven't, schemed it out how it would all play out financially. I think you simplified it in a really good way there. But I just think you're getting to a place now where you're going to have to sacrifice somebody to pay that kind of money to that many star players. And to me, it's not worth it given where you're at right now as a franchise.
Eric, what do you think? Is Laremy Tunsil still an option for the Chiefs?
I think it was either or, right? What's the point of having the best quarterback in the NFL if you need 5 elite offensive linemen? Like, I think, and people will say it the other way, like you need 5 elite offensive linemen to protect him. And I understand the playoffs, he got injured and that, affected him to a certain extent. But, I think the Taylor contract sort of ends that discussion. I mean, $20 million for a right tackle / left tackle is that, to Jeff's point, that's an elite player. Jones is going to be an elite player. Sneed's going to get, they never pay corners, but I think they'll end up paying him. And at some point, like that makes it tough, right? That means that you're going to have to skimp other places. And so I don't see it. I also think that, people will say this is stupid, but they're hosting the draft this year. I think they want to keep their pick. And so I think that they're if they can find an excuse to do that as well, which I think means no Tunsil.
So, Eric, how many times have the Green Bay Packers, since David Bakhtiari's been hurt, trotted out somebody at left tackle, and we sit here and say, man, this guy's a great player. How did they find this guy?
Yeah, Josh Nijman.
What's that?
Well, Josh Nijman's going to get a first-round tender, isn't he?
Yeah.
Even Bakhtiari, like David Bakhtiari is a fabulous player, but he's a 4th-round pick. And like I said, development at tackle is often about opportunity as well. You have a great quarterback. You give a left tackle, fourth round pick out of Colorado State, I believe, and you build him up to one of the best left tackles in football. Like Mahomes can do that too. Like Andrew Wiley was a freaking practice squad player who ends up making an eight. Now he's not great, but he's making $8 million APY now. Like that, you don't think Mahomes is part of that?
I'll push back a little bit here on this front, because the fact that there's an outlier in David Bakhtiari, if you make that your plan, you're an idiot. Okay, like in the fourth round, we're going to draft our left tackle is not a plan. It happened. You took,
but that's not their plan right now, though.
Yeah, but that's but the idea that you can just you look at the highest graded offensive tackles in the game, they're almost exclusively all top 15 picks, right? Like there's a stray guy here and there, but for the most part, that's where you got to go. And from 31, I looked at one of the draft charts today and I went through it. The Chiefs would have to give up their first at 31, second, third, and probably fourth to go ahead and move up to get to 15, right? But based upon the draft charts. So Laremy Tunsil, if he wants out, if you can trade for him. And I agree with Jeff, and partially because Houston grossly overpaid to get him when they got him, that they don't want to look stupid, that they give him away for 30 cents on the dollar, even though he's now got more wear and tear and years on him. I think they're unlikely to give him up. I think number 31 at least is going to be the asking price. And I don't know, I wouldn't go any more than that if I were the Chiefs. But the reason to do it is because do you really do you want to be tied into the most expensive guards in football? No. So like Trey Smith's contract is going to be what it is. You're going to move on from Joe Thuney. If you would get Laremy Tunsil and sign him to where he's a Chief for 4 years, you have Juwan Taylor. His deal is legitimately a 3-year deal. Then those guys stay. And as Joe Thuney falls off next year, you walk on Trey Smith, take the compensation picks, and you're stronger at the more important spots. That's the reason to do it. Not because you're going to keep all 5 guys in perpetuity, because you're preparing to let those guys walk. I think the center is different. I think you're going to pay the center. But walking on both guards, if you've got a really good center and 2 really good tackles, is not a bad plan.
I don't know. I think that's a fair point. But again, if you really game it out, look, they got to find – are we willing to sit here and bet that the receivers they have right now, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, and Kadarius Toney, are going to be
playoff legends, by the way?
Yeah, are going to be consistent playmakers year in and year out for this team. Are they going to have to go find somebody for that? Are we going to sit here and say, yeah, defensive end's a big hole right now. Frank Clark's gone, but Mike Dana and whoever else they put over there is going to work out. If they've got to come to a situation where they've got to decide between Creed Humphrey or Nick Bolton, who they're going to hold on to, can they work it out? The more you win, the more people want to get paid. Like, that's the reality of it. And so the idea they're going to go through the next 2 or 3 years with everybody saying, I'll just take what they give me to be a part of the Chiefs, that's not realistic. What's realistic is that everybody's going to want to do what Orlando Brown just did, what Frank Clark just did, and they're going to say, if you're not paying me, I'm getting out of here and getting someplace else.
Yeah, that's to me
by the Larry Brown effect.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, but by solving the tackle spots, it's easier to walk on those. You can
right, but Petro, like, do you really? So Mahomes is going to start to cost and earn 50 to 60 million to the cap. One of the some of these years. Do you really want $100 million taken up on average out of 250 between left and right tackle and quarterback? Like that, because.
I mean, if we're gonna talk hypotheticals, then let's talk about what the real numbers are, because he doesn't get to 50 or 60 million for years, and he's frankly not going to get there on this deal. Okay, so here are the cap numbers. If we're going to talk in realities, he's 49 million this year if they don't roll it back, 45 the next, 46 the next, 42 the next. It's 2027 that he goes to 60 million. Well, then again,
Petro,
he's staying on this deal. It's 44, 45, so on. So those are the numbers, and the answer is yes. Because if he doesn't play, and Orlando Brown almost got him killed against Jacksonville, yes, this is the one spot where I want to add a number to his number and have it be $100 million. Because to Jeff's point, what I think they're going to do now is they're going to throw the draft picks at the wide receiver spot.
You can't BS the math guy here. It's 49 this year, and then if you convert, it's more than 50 the following year, right, Petro?
If you do, but if they don't, it's 44 next
Come on,
year.
Man. And I get what you're saying.
Hold on. If you're going to be the math guy, then be the accurate math guy, because it's 49 million this year. If you convert, that number comes down to 28 million. Okay, so what do you want to do
next year? Because 34 divided by 5.
You're talking out of your ass, Eric. You're talking out of your ass here.
The next year.
You're just shouting over me and not listening to the numbers. If you want to talk about him counting 49, then there's no proration. He'll count 44 next year. If you want to talk about him counting more than that, then he would come down to 28 this year. So he doesn't just mystically go up 7 million without you converting it. Those are the numbers. And irrelevant of the numbers
where he's going to cost more than 50 if you convert this year, right?
And would you rather have the 50 on the field playing or sitting and watching?
But this is over dramatic. The Chiefs have had the year that the Chiefs made the Super Bowl in 2020. Their offensive line was Andrew Wiley, Mike Remmers, something called Austin Ryder, Nick Allegretti, and I can't remember. I honestly don't. Stefan Wisniewski, right? Who's a pastor now, right? And I agree that he got it, but Orlando Brown is an average left tackle. So you're telling me unless they get a better than average left tackle, he's going to get hurt?
No, I think you greatly reduce the odds of him getting hurt if you have a better than average left tackle.
Mahomes has gotten injured how many times in his career? 4, right? He got injured toe against the Cleveland Browns, which was a non-contact injury. He got injured on an option play against the Browns, and that was a concussion. He got injured on a quarterback sneak against Denver, which again, and then yes, one of those 4 times he got injured in the pocket because of a fat ass left tackle that couldn't contain Jawaan Smoot. So yes, I do agree with you that you do reduce it. The injury risk is irreducible at a certain level. You can, and it's not that high to begin with. He's mobile. He gets out of the pocket. I look at this and I say, this is a team that had problems in recent years because they had too concentrated of risk on too few players. And last offseason, they spread that risk out a little bit and won the freaking Super Bowl. So why concentrate the risk additionally on 2 players who Mahomes already helps? Mahomes protects his offensive line. He doesn't protect Chris Jones. He doesn't protect L'Jarius Sneed. He doesn't protect Nick Bolton. He doesn't protect the rest of the defense. So when I agree with you that it helps, but it comes at the cost of the rest of the roster, does it not?
This is the point where my jaw hits the floor when Eric becomes the guy hyping up defensive, football.
It's a great point.
Yelling at Jeff. I guess I'm now the guy.
Yeah.
After yelling at Jeff about how defense doesn't matter, suddenly now capologist Eager is worried about building the defense.
I'm worried about making sure the defense isn't a freaking nightmare, Petro. That's my point.
Because when it was a nightmare, they were 1 penalty away from going to the Super Bowl.
But they didn't go.
Because of a penalty.
That's the whole point, right?
Well, then the ends justify the means, I guess, right? That's what it is. As long as we're going to go there, then that's how you view it.
The Chiefs this year were, and I said Jawaan Smoot because it's a funny name. It's actually Arden Key. Sorry, don't let the facts get in the way of me using a funny name. But the Chiefs had the best player in the league get injured halfway through the second game of the playoffs, or the second week of the playoffs, and won the Super Bowl in large part because their defense carried them in the Jaguars game and the Bengals game.
I guess the better question to ask would be, how many left and right tackle can you remember from Tom Brady's career in New England?
Nate Solder, a lot of them. Trey Brown. I mean, I can remember a lot of them. And listen, I get the point. But we're not talking about acquiring a guy.
Petro, you went out on a limb a couple years ago, and I thought you were, and I still think you're very smart. You were very smartly said the Chiefs should be in on the Laramie Tunsil.
Yes.
And we talked about that last year. We talked about last year. Are you sure you're not rooting for your prediction here?
100%. Because I don't think my prediction is it's not going to happen. But the concept, when we talk about the ideas here, and if the ideas are being discussed at Arrowhead, like we are, and I'm sure they are, I'm sure there is this debate about how much we're going to put into it. And my point is, We're going to put enough that we protect the man as best we can. And we went to Joe Thuney because we couldn't find anything better at the right tackle spot. That's why they went to Joe Thuney. They tried for Trent Williams. So to sit here and think that they don't value the top tackle, they're the one that drove Trent Williams' price to where it's at. So to think that they wouldn't consider doing everything they can to get Laremy Tunsil is missing how this team is operated from the get-go. Because they didn't get him doesn't mean they didn't want him. They wanted him incredibly badly.
Oh, there's no question. But I think the point we're making is that there's a point where desire shouldn't drive execution. Like, you shouldn't be so in love with a guy to have him to protect your quarterback that you're willing to give away everything to have him. I would sit here and tell you they'd be better with Trent Williams, but what Trent Williams got was not worth the price to get him. It worked out anyway.
I will bet you that the Chiefs, if they could have had Trent Williams instead of Joe Thuney and had Nick Allegretti there and didn't go get Orlando Brown and use that first-round pick, they would be a better team. The problem was that San Francisco, clearly at some point you get to where they're just +1, no matter what we offer. And he clearly wanted to be in California. And as long as they kept matching, it was a fool's errand. At some point, you got to get on to doing business. Either you want to be with us or not. And that's why I think they bailed, because the Niners just kept matching. And I think that's where he ultimately wanted to be. So they wisely pivoted and said, we're going in another direction. But if Laremy Tunsil, that's why I say I think it doesn't even matter. Unless Laremy Tunsil is going to say, I want the hell out of Dodge. It's not even an option.
Well, and you look at
Houston, an option, it should be explored to the nth degree.
You look at Houston's moves, right? So they went and got Shaq Mason. I'm trying to remember who else they draft. Like, they're building that offensive line for whoever the second quarterback in the draft is, or the first. Like, I actually think that there's a realistic chance that Carolina, we'll talk about this on Too Deep, but like, Carolina bought an option on the first pick. That's what they did, and they're holding it. The Bears got out of the first pick to show Justin Fields that they were in on him, for better or worse. And like but like, Houston's building an offensive line for that freaking quarterback, right? Because like they have no other routes. Their defense.
And who else are they paying down there?
Yeah,
it's not like
right. I mean,
need to get rid of him.
That rostered Chris Conley for like 3 years. They're a mess.
But that's where I would ask: are you just rooting for your prediction that, hey, he's not going to be here, so I'm going to justify all the reasons why they shouldn't even try it?
Look, to try to ascribe what is it, direction out of the Houston Texans front office is a little bit of a folly.
I agree.
So like, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, as saying they're trying to protect a young quarterback for once.
Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area, is hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members. They're filling them up, but they're still open. Take advantage of it right now if you want to work for the fastest growing company. One of the fastest growing companies in Kansas City. Great place to work. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, paid time off, insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check them out online at GannAsphalt.com for more information. Serving Kansas City since 1994, making parking lot problems disappear. Online at GannAsphalt.com. Odell Beckham Jr., Jeff, worked out. The Chiefs were one of, I think, 20 teams that were there. How interested should they be in Odell Beckham Jr.?
Well, it depends on what his price tag is, but given that you only have 3 receivers under contract who were significant contributors to your team last year, I mean, you got to find some options somewhere. I don't suspect that option's coming in the draft. They can draft somebody, but given what Sky Moore did in his first year with his team, 22 catches, a couple hundred yards, you're not relying on that person to come in and have a huge contribution to this team's offense. So, yeah, I think I'm sure they're definitely looking at it. It's not a great market for receivers. Eric's made a good point about the kind of receivers this team likes to go get. So, he's not the fastest guy in the world anymore, but he could still be what Juju Smith-Schuster was for this team last year if he's healthy enough. I look at the names all the time at that list of receivers, and I'm just like, who would fit? Like a DJ Chark would be somebody you would think would make sense. A Paris Campbell might be a guy, a fast guy who kind of, didn't do a whole lot in Indy, but still has great traits. But yeah, I think Odell is going to be of interest. The problem is Odell's going to want to go to a lot of places. He's going to want to be in a sexy spotlight type city. He's going to want to be a marquee type guy. And They got pretty lucky with what Juju brought to this team last year, given what we've seen in the offseason, as far as his controlling his personality and playing and being okay. If you're going to be on this team as a receiver, you got to be okay with having some games where you're going to get 3 balls and 60 yards. And maybe another game you're going to get 6 for 116. And so the mix they had this past year, it worked well because those guys weren't really caught up in the stats. I suspect Odell might not be as crazy about that if he's not getting paid crazy money to be here.
Your thoughts on Odell, Eric?
Be fun, but they just don't like guys who are broken down and who are old, like who are 30-ish, right? Like everybody, in the comment, I've always, and this is me again sort of making a prediction and rooting for it, but like essentially I don't think they're in on DeAndre Hopkins. I could be wrong. Certainly I've been wrong before. But everybody's like, well, they went on Dunlap and guys like that. It's like, those guys are 1-year deals. Those guys are flyer guys. Like for Odell or a guy like Hopkins, you're paying them multiple years and they just don't like to be in on players, for long-term deals if they're older or they're not already Chiefs, like Chris Jones, right? But like the guys that they bring in from the outside, they're Jawaan Taylor. They're 25 years old type players. Sammy Watkins was kind of that age when he came in, etc. And that this doesn't really fit the bill.
Juju was that age. Juju was what, 25, 26 years old.
Juju was a young second contract player, or third contract in his case, but it was weird because his second contract was a 1-year deal. But like that's who they're in on. So now they could change their stripes a little bit. Obviously, if these players give them a discount because they want to win a Super Bowl, then great. But I've always found that the players don't really give those kind of discounts to teams. I mean, Juju did because he was.
It's the biggest myth going.
Taking
less money to go play someplace.
Yeah, well,
the star.
Like, do you really want to be Chad Ochocinco and go to the Patriots and be an afterthought on a Super Bowl team? Like that's like the worst thing ever to happen to a guy. So, I just don't see it, but it'll be fun wherever he goes.
Yeah, for sure. DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans' name is out there as the Bucs have cap problems. He's also 30 years old, has 9 years wear and tear.
Not a separator, not a yard catch guy.
But Juju's not a separator either. So if you're thinking of that, kind of role where Juju was playing, I'm just giving you the names. I don't think they're moving for anybody who's 30 years old. I'm with you. I think they like young guys. I think if there's a trade, it's going to be somebody. I think Laremy Tunsil is on the very edge of even being able to be considered, and that's a position that ages much better than wide receiver does. So I don't think they're going to be looking down that road. DJ Chark's the only one that seems to fill, which would seem to lead them back when it comes to wide receiver in talking in the draft to try to find help there with the receivers. But I'm sure there'll be some 1-year deals on some guys out there that they're at least talking about. Anyone else, Jeff, that they ought to be targeting in free agency?
Well, you'd love to find an edge rusher, but good luck with that class. That crop is not rife with talent. And I think that's maybe safety, but I think they like Brian Cook a lot. I think he could be a good tandem with Justin Reed. They'll find a third guy somewhere else in the mix, maybe in the draft. I don't think they have to be in a rush to go out and fill any void right now, except for what they're looking at, which is offensive tackle, probably receiver.
Eric, you got anything that they ought to be looking at, at least a direction or a specific name?
Yeah, I do agree with Jeff. I think you have to look for edge depth. I think you have to look for wide receiver depth, but it's got to be the wide receiver depth that kind of is their type of wheelhouse. Maybe you wait a little bit. And think about a guy like Leonard Floyd again, like that's a 31-year-old guy, but been around the block a little bit as far as teams and everything. I also think his value is lower on the open market than his statistics because everybody believes, he played with Aaron Donald. His statistics are inflated. It's got to be those guys. I agree with Jeff. The secondary could use another safety just because you're going to lose Thornhill in theory. So those are all situations. I mean, wide receiver, to me, they need depth more than they need the kind of a superstar guy.
And what about there's NFL trade rumors? I want to look and make sure. Not seeing. I don't know how the check marks work anymore.
The tweets? Talking about Twitter?
Yeah. 330,000 followers, I'm assuming. 182,000 tweets. Let's see if it goes to the site before I credit. Yeah, it does seem to be going to the site. NFL trade rumors reporting that Chiefs signing defensive lineman Charles Omenihu to a 2-year deal worth up to $20 million. Thoughts on that, Jeff?
I thought somebody else signed him. I heard his name. Oh, where's he? Where did he come from?
He's a Niner. He's Niners. He didn't come up for free agency here.
Okay. PFF is also putting that out there.
Okay. So is it depth?
So
I'll have to look up the data, fellas.
What I think he had 6.5, 7.5 sacks. I was looking at him when I was going through all the free agents last year. But I mean, the 49ers value defensive linemen. They spent on Hargrave, obviously, a lot of money. They didn't value here. But I think this kind of speaks to where the Chiefs are. This is to your point about, your rage towards me, Eric, about all the money being spent on tackles. Spread it out, right? It's good players everywhere. Defense is a no-holes game, right?
Yeah. He had a 69.7 PFF grade last year, 44th among edge players out of 119. Not terrible. 48th in wins above replacement. So he's only 25 and a half years old. That seems like a decent signing for them.
And that's their wheelhouse. They love the 25, 26-year-old fringe. Yeah. When Fuller came back in the Alex Smith deal, he was 25. They love the youth. And youth stays healthy. I think it's a smart move. I mean, old guys get hurt, young guys stay healthy. That's a big part of the equation. All right, that's going to do it for us. If you are a fan that regularly checks us out on the stream, we're going to be shutting down, going to go over to our NFL podcast, the 2 Deep podcast. If you have never checked that out, check it out wherever you get your podcast, TOO Deep, 2 Deep podcast. The podcast, we appreciate you listening there. If you've never seen us streamed live, you can be a part of the chat room, be a part of the conversation, as many, many people were tonight. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, and for our fine sponsors at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. If your business needs any work of any kind when it comes to your parking lot, make sure you find Gann Asphalt and Concrete there at 816-484-3338. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. We will see you next week on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.